Hi, I'm Amy Rowe, and I am a coach with Fast Forward College Coaching. And today I want to talk to you about some of the secrets to efficient learning in college. There are a couple of pretty standard practices that students use to improve their retention and to make studying more efficient. And knowing what those strategies are can be super helpful for you in college. So let's talk through what they are. So, first, we're going to talk a little bit about building structure before you actually start to study. Then, we're going to talk about retrieval practice, also known as spaced repetition, which you may have heard about before. I'm going to talk about the value of interleaving. I'm going to talk about three things that sort of travel together. And these are ways to sort of increase your understanding of learning, and that's elaboration, generation, and reflection. And then finally, I want to talk about growth mindset. So these are the areas we're going to talk about. And today, I want to start with structure building. Okay, so I just want to caution you that I went to ChatGPT and I asked it to rewrite my titles um, in video game lingo. So if these are corny, I apologize, but you can blame ChatGPT. Okay, so first of all, when you are studying, you need to first have a structure. You If you go in trying to look at things and you just see a bunch of details, a bunch of like facts or whatever that are just thrown at you, you're really going to struggle to figure out how those facts relate to one another. So, this is why, for example, when you read a textbook, it's set up into chapters. And then within the chapters, there are headings. And then within the headings, there are subheadings. And within the subheadings, there are typically bolded words and also main ideas at the beginning of each sentence. So, that's sort of how I want you to approach learning. I want you to create that structure for yourself before you actually try and start learning. So how can you do that? Well, first of all, if you have very little foundation in something, I would strongly recommend you look for other sources. YouTube lessons are a good place to start for a lot of students. So let's say you're learning about a biology topic, but you really have zero background. Maybe you don't remember any of the thing from high school, whatever. Go to YouTube and find a topic that is similar or a foundational topic and watch that lesson and maybe take some notes on it. Maybe actually write down what are some of the main ideas, right? Because that's going to help you a lot to create that structure to attach information to when you're actually starting to learn. You can also look at other texts. I always tell students, your textbook is not the only textbook that's out there. And sometimes some textbooks work better for some students than others do. Through your library, you probably have access to tons of digital texts. If you don't know, go see your school librarian because there might be a textbook that explains a concept in a better way for you than what you're given. So use other sources. And of course, your professor is probably your best way to understand something. So if you don't quite get it, go to office hours or utilize tutoring to make sure that you can have that structure so you know what it is that you're studying. So once you kind of have that overall structure, you need to kind of actually write it down. So creating an outline or a concept map or some type of illustration or drawing would be really helpful for you. I'm an outline girl. I love words, so outlines make a lot of sense for me. So probably before I did a chapter of reading, I might go to my textbook, identify all the headings and the subheadings, and then bolded words, and maybe even, topic sentences from each of the paragraphs. And I might just create an outline for myself. And then as I go back and read, I'll fill in information from the reading that explains things. Another thing you can do is look for the learning objectives in the lesson description. Not every professor does this, but a lot of professors do these days create learning objectives for each lesson. A lot of times you'll find them at the beginning of the syllabus. You'll find the entire course's learning objectives, but also look and see if your professor writes learning objectives for each lesson. Those are going to tell you what they want you to get out of things. And so that's a perfect place to begin creating an outline or a concept map. Look for connections and relationships in your notes. So this is where concept maps can be really, really helpful. If you don't know what a concept map is, look it up. It's an easy Google. There's tons of explanations on how to create them, but essentially it's just a picture of how different ideas interrelate with something. So your main idea is in the center, your subheadings are surrounding it and connected by lines, and then each subheading has the details and facts attached to it. And then sometimes there are connections in between those things. If you're a visual learner, if you really love to picture things, and also if that's a great way for you to remember, then a concept map is a really great way for you to approach learning. And if you're really stuck, just Google the concept and the word outline and look at ways other people describe it. Sorry, I didn't finish that sentence there, but look at the different ways other people might describe that idea. So an example might be, let's say you are trying to understand the War of 1812. So Google War of 1812 outline, and you will find dozens of people who have broken the War of 1812 into probably the main factors for the war and who was involved and what were the great battles and what was the timeline, right? So you'll be able to kind of utilize those topic headings to structure your own learning. So use this in accordance with the information that your professor has provided. So whether that's lectures or textbook learning, but always make sure you're referring back to what they have given you, because they might be testing specifically on what they've given you. So retrieval practice, or spaced repetition, is another way to say this, is a way for you to study information and really put it in from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. So retrieval practice means that you are going to practice remembering. So retrieval practice isn't just spaced repetition. It's also actually testing yourself. It's called the testing effect. If you test yourself at regular intervals, you will take information from your short-term memory and put it into your long-term memory. This makes sense, right? Like the more you look at something, the more it makes sense to you, the more you remember about that topic. So flashcards, self-tests, Quizlets, go through your notes and create self-tests for yourself. You don't have to do them right away. Just maybe, take today's notes, take maybe 10 topics from those notes and create a multiple choice quiz for yourself. Quizlet's a great way to create these quizzes. And then maybe in a week, come back and test yourself on that material. Same thing with flashcards. You want to test yourself more frequently to begin with, especially if it's something that you really want to hook into your long-term memory. So if you're maybe it's vocabulary for a language class that you're in, you probably want to test yourself more frequently. But then you need to let more time go by between repetitions, because you need to see if you've actually forgotten that information. Because there is a big difference between recognizing something and then actually retaining it, remembering it. So desirable difficulties is the concept that your brain actually needs to work a little bit harder in order to remember information. So if you don't give yourself a chance to forget something and then try and drag it back into your memory, then you're probably going to just have that recognition happening. But what you need to do is give enough time so that your brain forgets a little bit, and then you can come back and see if you can remember it. Interleaving is simply the concept that you're going to switch up what you're studying from time to time. So if we think about how we typically study for final exams, for example, you'll often okay, I have my final exam on Tuesday. I'm going to start Sunday night and I'm going to just study Sunday night, all of Monday, and then take my exam on Tuesday. Well, that's a great way to study, oftentimes, especially if you're somebody that has a great short term memory, but you will forget all of that, I guarantee you. And if anything happens to you, for example, you get anxious during the exam or something else happens, you might forget everything that you studied because it never went into your long term memory. So it's better for you to start earlier and then study a little bit of one thing, mix it up, study something else for a while, and then come back to that original topic. So switch up your studying so that your brain has a chance to actually put stuff into your long-term memory. And then these are the three fancy words. You don't need to remember any of this, just remember the concepts. So elaboration just means when you're studying, try and explain things in your own words. So when you're writing notes, do not write things word for word from your textbook or from the professor's lecture. Put it in your own words. And if you like to take notes on a lecture, but you're not fast enough to sort of put it into your own words, you're just fast enough to keep up with that lecture, then either A, record the lecture, which is a way that you could go back and re-listen and then explain them in your own words, or take your notes that have the direct words that your professor spoke and rewrite them in your own words. Speak it out loud, write it out, whatever it is, that is going to help you attach things to your long-term memory. Generation means to try to guess what things might mean before you even study them. So you're studying meiosis and mitosis. All you know that it has something to do with cell division. Maybe try and guess based on other things that you know what those might have to do with. Another way to use generation is to create those self-tests, and instead of giving yourself multiple choice options, actually just cover up the multiple choice options and guess what the answer is. Do that with study guides too. Don't use the multiple choice options. Just guess what the answer is. That helps you really make sure you understand what that topic is. And reflection means to relate concepts to things you know. So when you're studying, just try and think of examples of somehow that relates to something that you're familiar with. Whether it's a theoretical concept or it is a something that you've seen happen in real life, doesn't matter. Just relate concepts to things that you know and are familiar with. And finally, and probably most importantly, is growth mindset. So if you're not familiar with growth mindset, this was a concept that Carol Dweck, who is a psychologist, came up with. And she basically said in a growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just a starting point. So what does that mean? It means that you're not either smart or not smart. You're not good at something or not good at something. It means that we all can get better if we believe we can get better. So, and I'm going to give you an example of this from my own life. I was not a math person, and for many, many years of my life, I insisted I couldn't do math. And I refused. Like honestly, like even when it came to time to calculate the tip or, figure something out at the grocery store, I just sort of refused to do it and would let other people do the math for me, even if it was like super basic math. And a lot of that was, in fact, 100% of that was me turning my brain off and believing that I just couldn't do it, that there were people who were good at math and people who weren't. And then when I was 40 years old, I went to start a new job that I thought was going to be teaching reading. And on the first day, the principal came into my office and he said, hey, by the way, Amy, we actually are just going to need you to teach basic math for a couple of weeks until the math teacher starts. And I said, what? And he's like, no, 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 it's fine, Amy. It's just middle school math, like decimals, fractions, multiplication, division, no big deal. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I freaked out and I really considered quitting the job because I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to embarrass myself in front of these students. Well, I went home and I studied and I said to myself, you can do this. This isn't impossible. It's middle school math. And sure enough, it really wasn't that hard when I stopped telling myself I couldn't do it. And then I kind of started liking it. And by the time I was a year into that position, I had continued to teach math because I was the most popular math teacher, because I understood that kids had difficulty learning it. And I wouldn't let them say, I can't do math, because they can. And a couple of years after that job, I had an email from a student who said, this was a job where I was working with like young adults, who emailed me and she said, Amy, you taught me math at 23 years old. I'm never, ever in my life going to say I can't do something again, because I really thought I couldn't do math and you taught me that I could. So next time you want to shut yourself down and say, I can't get this, walk away for a little while and then come back and try again, because you can. And that is all I have for you today. So thank you for your attention today. I wish you the best of luck in your next year at college. And if you've got any questions, talk to your coach at Fast Forward College Coaching. Bye.